Hi, this is Mr. Sapora and
Rory Sullivan
and
Tatum Sullivan, which is so cool.
and we're here to bring you this week's Species
List.
List. Ding ding ding. This week we're going to be covering Species List number 3, focusing on more cnidarians and worms. Now, you may be saying to me, what's a cnidarian and why do I have to know this? Well, let's flip over here. Okay, so one of the things you'll notice on the weekly species list, this is a copy of the blank one that we were using in class, and the one I have on my class website. I'm going to attach a copy of this document to this week's species list. What you may notice on it is on the back side, I have a section for phylum notes. Okay, so we're going to jump into this real quick. What is a phylum? Well, in science and in biology, we divide living things into groups, right? The first group is domains based on cell type, prokaryote, eukaryote, and then there's kingdoms below that. There's 6 of those: animals, plants, fungus, protista, bacteria, and archaea. Rory?
What kingdom is this in?
So, good question. The kingdom that we're working on is the animal kingdom. That's what we're going to focus on. And then phylums go right below kingdom. And one of the phylums we're talking about this week is cnidarians. It looks like Cnidarian, doesn't it? But you don't say the C. Or you can. You can say cnidarian. So,
Cnidarians.
Okay. So what are cnidarians? What do they have in common? What do they share? What makes a cnidarian a cnidarian? Good question. So cnidarians are a group of animals. They're all aquatic, meaning they all live in water, and they're all mostly marine. And they consist of corals, jellyfish, anemones, and these weird little things called hydroids. We're not going to spend too much time. Here's a picture of one right here. This little hydroid is there. So anyway, there's about 10,000 species right now in the world. There's been many, many more throughout time. And one of the key characteristics that all cnidarians have, a feature that they all have, is they all have these little stingy things called cnidocysts. They're special stinging cells, pew, 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 that they shoot out. They're used to capture prey. It paralyzes or puts them into a lot of pain, kills them, whatever. Now, not all of them have stinging cells that can affect us as humans. So a lot of anemones you can touch and things like that, no big deal. But jellyfish and things have pretty powerful ones. It just depends what they're trying to eat. If they're trying to eat something kind of small, well, what might not sting you could really sting them. I've got to get a move. What? What?
Do all of all the cnidarians, do they all depend on their shock of it?
Yeah, they kind of do. Some of them are sticky, but they all kind of use these little cnidocysts to capture prey. And that prey could be things as tiny as plankton, right? So what could sting a plankton, you would never notice, right? So it just depends. Okay. Kids, I gotta kick you out because this video has to be short. And I got a lot to cover still, so I'm gonna move fast now. Tatum, did you want to ask a question real quick though?
I'm so cool.
Oh, you are so cool. Thank you. Oh no. Okay. I need to back this up now. What else about cnidarians that they have in common? They have an inner and an outer epithelium, meaning they have like a skin, basically, which is unique because when sponges were around before cnidarians, they didn't even have that. But they really just have like 2 layers, an inner layer, an outer layer, contacts the world, and then this kind of jelly-like layer in the middle. That's really about it. Pretty simple animals. Radial symmetry. We are bilateral, meaning we have a right and a left, top and a bottom. That's bilateral symmetry. Things with bilateral symmetry, let me think of other things with bilateral. Insects, of course, have bilateral symmetry. Starfish have radial symmetry. Cnidarians have radial symmetry. Clams and slugs and snails actually have bilateral symmetry. Worms, radial, some bilateral. right in the middle. They have a single orifice and body cavity, meaning what they eat out of, they poop out of. Yeah. So what goes in comes out. And then they have like a nerve net, but they don't have a centralized nervous system that processes information. They have a bunch of nerves. Each nerve kind of goes, hey, and that's about it. Moving on. So in that group of animals, now we're going to look at the specific species that we have in our area. But as a group, there are many, many, many types of cnidarians. There's many types of jellyfish. There's many types of anemones, and you may recognize them just by their features alone from the phylum. Okay, we have 5 this week, I believe, on the list. I may have to correct myself in a second. The first one is the orange sea pen. Its scientific name, you want to follow along with me here, is Tilosarcus gurnii. So it's Tilosarcus gurnii. You do not pronounce the P on that one. What is unique about this one? Well, they're a colonial polyp. And what a colonial polyp means is that when you're looking at this particular sea pen itself, you're not looking at one individual organism, you're looking at a whole bunch of organisms living and working together colonially. Hey, so they're a bunch of little tiny organisms making up the whole, such as like this. All of these are little polyps. I have a lot of these in my aquarium and things like that, but these are really, really tiny ones. So each of these, if you looked with a magnifying glass or a microscope, let me zoom in on this one here and see if we can't get a better look at one up close. Anyway, on each of these blades are little tiny mini anemone-like creatures, and here they are in this diagram here. And then they make up the whole darn thing. Kind of cool. We actually have these here. They're in the bays. They're in Netart's Bay. I've seen them snorkeling and things like that. They anchor into soft sediment, and if you bug them, they can go down underground and then pop back up. And they like to be in areas where there's kind of water currents going back and forth because they act as a filter feeder and they catch things in that kind of, reminds me of an air filter of a car, actually. So they catch little plankton in there and they feed on that. Okay, other one on the species list this week is the moon jelly. That's right, folks, moon jelly. The scientific name for this one is Aurelia labiata. Let's say it again. Aurelia labiata. Okay, that is the moon jelly. This is a jellyfish that gets pretty big. About as big as your face or bigger. These are the clear kind of jelly-like ones that wash up on the beaches here. You can see they have 4 little crescents inside of the middle, and those are actually their reproductive organs, their gonads. And these guys reproduce. A lot of sea creatures reproduce by actually not coming into physical contact with each other. They broadcast. So what they do is they just kind of release a bunch of spunk into the water, and then other jellyfish release their spunk into the water, and it all kind of mixes together, and babies are made in a bathtub. And for moon jellies, when we see them is usually around this time of year, actually, and they're kind of large plankton. Basically, they are large plankton, and so they follow the currents. They show up this time of year in large numbers, and they'll kind of move into bays and estuaries where all the water's kind of contained, so that when they do this broadcast reproduction, all their stuff kind of mixes in one smaller pool than if they were to do it in the ocean, a larger pool. Maybe, their stuff would just get spread out everywhere, and it wouldn't find other jellyfish stuff and make more jellyfish. Okay. Moon jelly. I like to say it, moon jelly. Okay. Next up on the hit parade is the By the Wind Sailor, or a real easy one to remember, a Velella. That's right. And this one I remember because there's so many of them. When you see one, you see like a zillion because they wash up in the beach in these huge numbers, and you can just walk down the beach going Velella, 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 all day long. As you name them. There we go. Yeah, little tiny guys. They got a little sail on top that is a kind of protein layer, almost like cartilaginous or like a fingernail, softer than that. But then on the outside here is the actual hydroids, which is basically another colonial polyp, another colonial cnidarian. And each of these is an individual that then kind of makes up the whole thing itself, similar to the Portuguese man of war Again, they're planktonic, and so they wash up in huge numbers this time of year as well, en masse each spring. So we should probably start seeing those if we haven't already. Thanks to the closures, a lot of my favorite beaches are kind of harder to get to now. Oh, my favorite one. Okay, Nodocomplana, otherwise known as a flatworm. Flatworms are weird. These are not a Cnidarian, and I threw them in here just to kind of get one in the mix. Yep. And so now we're switching out of Cnidarians. Nodocomplana, pretty well phonetic. And I say SPA on here. The SPP is an abbreviation for one kind of species. There's so many in this particular genus that kind of pulling one out, and then they become really hard to tell from each other anyway. So I'm never quite sure what species I'm looking at unless I have a really good ID book with me, because there are quite a few. Flatworms are the first step away, or evolutionarily, a little more complex than Cnidarians. 800 million years ago, right, there was sponges and Cnidarians as far as animals, and there wasn't much else in the ocean. A lot of single-celled stuff and algae and things like that. But as far as the first animal groups, flatworms come about, and they have a few features that are... They share in common with Cnidarians, and then they share with other more highly evolved organisms, so they're kind of that intermediate. They are bilateral. They have a right and a left, but they have no body cavity, meaning just like a Cnidarian, what goes in one hole comes out the other. They don't have a through system with a gut to process and stuff. They swallow, they digest, they soak up, and they have to puke out the leftovers. They don't poop. They have no circulation or respiratory system. So they're flat because all the oxygen has to go through osmosis. So it kind of has to just seep through their skin and get to all their tissue. If they're big and round, oxygen might not make it to that middle area. And that tissue would become necrotic and dead or wouldn't function very well. So it's better to become flat, and you have a much greater surface area touching, so you can get oxygen and also get rid of carbon dioxide. So all of this through diffusion. But they do have these real primitive eye spots. So they have a little more complex nervous system. I got two of these open. And you can see the two little dark dots here. We call eye spots, meaning they can sense light and dark, but they can't really make out any sort of image. So they're really primitive proto-eyes, if you will, right? Not what we think of as an eyeball, but it is, right? It's a nerve that reacts to electromagnetic radiation. Cool. Okay. And last on our list would be the American bloodworm. Now, this is a more complex worm. This is a worm with a circulatory system. This is a worm with an in and an out hole, of first through digestive systems. There's actually, out of the 9 different phylums of animals, so animal kingdom, phylum below it, there's 9 of those. Cnidarians, the one we've been talking about, and sponges would be the most primitive. Porifera is sponge. And then we've got 3 different groups of worms. So the worms are incredibly diverse. These are the segmented worms, or annelid worms, and these are long. The longest worm is a marine worm. It's 150 feet long. Gross. They got these little gilly things on the side that they also use to dig, and they have these paralytic jaws that can actually paralyze you when they bite. And these were the inspiration for the movie Tremors as well. Click on them, take a look. I am running short on time here, so I want to be sure to get this video done. So, for you this week, oh, here's a picture of them. Gross. Okay, so what I need you to know for this week, of course, the common names, the species names, a fun fact, but also I want you to know 2 things about Cnidaria, a fact about them, and then 1 distinguishing characteristic. That could be the cnidocyst, that could be the radial symmetry, single orifice opening. Any one of those will do. 1 specific physical fact, that what makes the group, and then 1 just whatever, another fact about them. 2 things about Cnidaria. They could both be physical for all I care. Or 1 could be numbers and whatnot. And then I want you to know your species. I will post up the Quizlet and the blank species list as well as the slideshow. And now I'm going to jump on and do lecture notes for you. Species list 3. Peace. How do I turn this thing off? It's a problem.